Late at night on a deserted street, Aisha, a single mother, was on her way home with her young son after a long, exhausting shift when she suddenly heard muffled sobbing nearby. She turned and saw an elderly couple huddled together at the bus stop ahead, trembling in the biting cold. Despite a flicker of fear about the legal trouble that might follow, Aisha stepped forward, asked what had happened, and decided to bring the two strangers back to her small apartment to care for them. What she didn't know was that this simple act of kindness would expose a brutal truth and change all of their lives forever. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The wind cut through Aisha's coat like a blade. She pulled Malik closer, feeling his small body shiver against her side. "Mama, I'm cold." "I know, baby. Just 2 more blocks." Her fingers were numb, the kind of numb that made her wonder if she'd even be able to turn the key when they got home. She'd worked a double shift at the records office sorting files for 9 hours straight, while Malik sat in the break room doing homework. The overtime pay would cover groceries for the week. Maybe. "My feet hurt," Malik said. He was dragging now, each step slower than the last. "Mine too." Aisha tried to smile. "Race you to the corner." "Mama, I can't." "I know, sweetie. I'm just playing." The snow was coming down thick now, turning the streetlights into blurry halos. This neighborhood looked worse in winter. The abandoned storefronts, the cracked sidewalks, the bus shelter with its shattered glass panel, everything looked sharper in the cold. That's when she saw them. 2 figures huddled at the bus stop. Wrong figures for this street. Even through the snow, Aisha could make out the cut of their clothes. Expensive. The woman's coat was cashmere, or had been before someone tore the sleeve. The man wore leather shoes, completely impractical for this weather. Aisha's first instinct was to keep walking. Not her problem. This city had taught her that lesson early. But Malik had already stopped. "Mama, why are those people sitting in the cold?" The woman's face turned toward them. Even in the dim light, Aisha could see she'd been crying. Her makeup was streaked, her gray hair falling from what had probably been an elegant bun that morning. "Please," the woman's voice cracked. "Please, we need help." Aisha's grip tightened on Malik's hand. Every instinct screamed danger. Rich white people didn't end up in this neighborhood by accident. This was a setup, a scam something. The man slumped sideways. His eyes were half closed, his lips blue. "Arthur." The woman grabbed at him, her hand shaking. "Arthur, stay awake. Please stay awake." Damn it. Aisha took 3 steps forward, close enough to see the blood crusted on the man's temple, the way his whole body trembled, close enough to know this wasn't a performance. "What happened to you?" The woman looked up. Her eyes were the kind of blue that probably turned heads at country clubs and charity galas. Right now, they were desperate. "Our son, he and his wife, they took everything. They put us in a taxi and told the driver to drop us here." Her voice broke. "They said we were a burden, that we'd signed everything over to them. I didn't understand what I was signing." "You're telling me your own son dumped you in the hood?" Aisha heard the skepticism in her voice. "Yes." The woman's chin lifted. Even terrified and freezing, there was dignity there. "I know how it sounds. I know what we look like to you. But it's true." Arthur made a sound, something between a cough and a moan. His eyes weren't focusing right. "Mama," Malik tugged her sleeve. "Is that man sick?" "Yeah, baby, he is." This was insane. Aisha had $50 in her account and a 6-year-old to feed. She couldn't afford to be a good Samaritan. She couldn't afford anything except getting home, getting warm, and getting through another week. But she was already doing the math. Her apartment was 4 blocks away. The hospital was 12, and an ambulance would take at least 20 minutes in this weather. The man didn't have 20 minutes. "Can you walk?" Aisha asked the woman. Yes, I think so." "What's your name?" "Margaret. Margaret Sullivan. This is my husband, Arthur." "I'm Aisha. This is Malik." She bent down, getting eye level with the man. His pupils were uneven. Concussion, maybe. "Mr. Sullivan, can you hear me?" Arthur's eyes found hers. For just a second, they cleared. "Don't have to." "Yeah, I do. Come on." Aisha got her shoulder under his arm, surprised by how light he felt. How much weight had he lost? "Margaret, get on his other side." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm telling. We're going to my place. It's not much, but it's warm." Margaret's face crumpled. "Thank you. Oh, God, thank you." The 4 of them moved like a single broken creature through the snow. Arthur's feet barely touched the ground. Malik, bless him, stopped complaining about being tired and instead tried to hold Margaret's purse when she struggled. "Easy." Aisha said when Arthur stumbled, "One step at a time." "Why are you helping us?" Margaret's teeth were chattering. "You don't know us." Aisha didn't have a good answer. "Because I'm an idiot, probably. Because my mama raised me to help people even when it hurts. Because that could be me someday, and I hope someone would stop. Because it's cold," she said instead. They passed Mrs. Chen's corner store, dark now. Past the lot where teenagers sold whatever they were selling this week. Past the building where Aisha had grown up, where her mother had worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. Arthur was mumbling now. Something about Julian, about papers, about how he should have known. "Shh," Margaret whispered. "Save your strength." "I trusted him." Arthur's words slurred together. "My own son." I know. Malik looked up at Aisha. His eyes were full of questions she didn't know how to answer. "Almost there, baby." Her building looked even worse than usual. The broken intercom, the graffiti on the mailboxes, the smell of something rotting in the stairwell. Aisha saw it through Margaret's eyes and felt a flush of shame she immediately resented. This was home. It was clean. It was safe. It was what she could afford. "3rd floor," she said. "No elevator." "We'll manage," Margaret said firmly. They managed, barely. By the time Aisha got her door open, all 4 of them were gasping. She half-carried Arthur to the sofa, the only piece of real furniture she owned besides Malik's bed. "Malik, get the blankets from my bed. All of them." Her son ran. Good kid, the best kid. Aisha knelt in front of Arthur, checking his pulse. Fast but steady. She pulled out her phone cracked screen, but it worked, and turned on the flashlight, checking his eyes again. "What are you doing?" Margaret hovered behind her. "Checking for concussion signs. My mama was a nurse. Before the cancer took her, before Aisha had to drop out of nursing school to pay for the funeral. He needs a hospital." "No." Arthur's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "No hospitals. They'll find us. Julian has connections everywhere." "Sir, you might have a head injury." "Please." His eyes locked on hers, clear now and certain. "Just for tonight. Let us rest. Tomorrow we'll figure something out." Aisha pulled back. This was a bad idea, a terrible idea. But looking at them, at Margaret's desperate face, at Arthur's pleading eyes, she couldn't say no. "Fine. But if you start vomiting or passing out, I'm calling 911. I don't care who finds you." "Thank you," Margaret whispered. Malik returned with the blankets, his arms full. Aisha took them, wrapping Arthur first, then Margaret. The older woman's hands were like ice. "When did you last eat?" Aisha asked. "Yesterday morning." Margaret's voice was small. "Before the lawyer's appointment. Before we signed." She couldn't finish. Aisha understood. Sometimes the worst betrayals were the ones you walked into willingly. "I'll make soup," she said. "It's not much. Potato and, well, mostly potato, but it's hot." "You've already done so much." "Yeah, well, can't let you die on my couch. Terrible for the security deposit." It was a bad joke, but Margaret laughed anyway. A broken hiccuping sound that might have been a sob. In the kitchen, really just a corner with a hot plate and a mini fridge, Aisha pulled out the pot. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. What had she just done? Brought 2 strangers into her home. Strangers with a story that sounded like something from a movie. Rich people didn't get abandoned by their children. That happened to people like her mother, like the old man down the hall who drank too much, like Miss Aisha. She turned. Margaret stood in the doorway, clutching something to her chest. A leather bag, expensive and battered. "I need to show you something," Margaret said, "before I lose my courage." She opened the bag. Inside were papers, dozens of them crumpled and torn. "I grabbed these when they weren't looking," Margaret said. "From Julian's office. I didn't know what they were, but I thought maybe they were important." Aisha wiped her hands on her jeans and took the papers. Years of working in records had taught her to spot important documents, transfer deeds, bank authorizations. And there her breath caught. "What?" Margaret leaned forward. "What is it?" "This notary seal." Aisha held it up to the light. "It's wrong. The registration number doesn't match the date format they use now." "I don't understand." "I think." Aisha's mind raced. "I think your son's wife made a mistake. A big one." For the first time since she'd found them in the snow, Margaret smiled. It was fierce and cold and full of something that looked a lot like hope. Tell me everything, Margaret said. Outside the wind howled. The radiator clanked and hissed. Malik called out that he was hungry. And Aisha, who just wanted to get home and get warm, realized her life had just become impossibly complicated. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Mama, I'm still hungry. Aisha looked at the pot. Barely enough for 4 small bowls. She'd already given Malik the largest portion. Let me see what else we have, baby. The cabinets were nearly empty. Half a loaf of bread, some crackers, a jar of peanut butter with maybe 2 spoonfuls left. Margaret appeared beside her. Please don't give us your food. We've already taken too much. You haven't eaten since yesterday. Neither has your son, apparently. Margaret's voice was firm. Feed him first. Aisha pulled out the bread, stale but salvageable. 4 slices left. In the living room, Arthur was trying to sit up. His color was better, but he still moved like every bone hurt. Sir, you need to stay down. I need the bathroom. Aisha helped him stand, guided him down the narrow hallway. The bathroom light flickered, but it worked. Arthur didn't comment on the crack in the mirror or the rust stains. Thank you, he said quietly, for your kindness. Don't thank me yet. You're sleeping on a 20-year-old couch. I've slept in worse places. He settled back down. When I first started my business, I lived in my car for 6 months. The pain in his voice made Aisha's chest tight. Back in the kitchen, she found Malik and Margaret sitting at her tiny table. The old woman had coaxed a smile from her son. They were playing pat-a-cake. Again, Malik laughed. Margaret's hands trembled, but she played along. When she saw Aisha watching, her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I haven't heard a child laugh in so long. Aisha handed her a bowl of soup. Eat. The 4 of them sat together. The soup was thin, barely seasoned. The bread was stale. But they ate. Arthur took his first spoonful, closed his eyes. His throat worked as he swallowed. When Aisha handed Malik his bread, her son did something that broke her heart and made her proud. He tore his slice in half and walked it over to Arthur. You need it more, sir. You're sick. Arthur stared at the bread in Malik's small hand. Then his face crumpled. This man who'd built an empire started crying over half a slice of stale bread offered by a 6-year-old. I don't deserve this, Arthur said. You're people, Malik said simply. Mama says we help people. Margaret made a sound like something inside her had shattered. She stood abruptly, turned away, her shoulders shaking. Aisha put a hand on her arm. Hey, it's okay. It's not. Margaret's voice was raw. My own son said I was worthless, that I'd be better off dead, and this child gives us his food. That's what good people do, Aisha said quietly. We used to be good people. Margaret turned. Didn't we? We donated to charities. We went to church. Arthur spoke from the couch. We raised him to value success above everything else. We showed him the worth of money and forgot to teach him the worth of people. The room went quiet except for the radiators clanking. After they'd eaten, Aisha brought out old towels. She heated water in the pot and helped Margaret clean up. I can do it myself, Margaret protested. I'm a mother. I've cleaned up worse. She washed Margaret's face, her hands the blood from a cut on her arm. Evelyn did this, Margaret said. When I tried to grab my jewelry box, she pushed me into the desk. Aisha's jaw tightened. Your daughter-in-law sounds like a real piece of work. She married Julian for the money. I knew it from the start. They arranged sleeping spaces. Malik got the couch cushions. Margaret and Arthur would share the bed. Aisha would take the floor. Near midnight, Aisha sat at the table with Margaret's leather bag. The overhead light was burned out, so she worked by a dim lamp. Margaret sat across from her, wrapped in a borrowed robe. Arthur was sleeping. Show me everything, Aisha said. Margaret emptied the bag. Papers spilled across the table. Transfer deeds, bank documents, legal authorizations. I didn't know what I was grabbing, Margaret explained. Julian's office was locked, but that day the door was open. While Evelyn was calling the taxi, I shoved whatever I could reach into my purse. Aisha picked up the first document, a property transfer deed. She checked the date. The notary sealed the signatures. This notary, Robert Chen, license number 47839. Is that significant? Aisha pulled out her phone, opened the state database, typed in the license number. The result made her heart skip. Robert Chen's license was revoked 6 weeks ago. Fraud charges. Margaret leaned forward. Which means any document he notarized after that date is legally invalid. And this says you signed it 3 weeks ago. So it's fake. Someone did a rush job, used an old seal, didn't think anyone would check. Aisha shuffled through more papers. This bank authorization, different notary, but the signature looks identical. What does that mean? It means they got sloppy. They forged your signatures, used invalid notaries, and didn't expect you to be alive long enough to challenge it. Margaret's face went pale. They wanted us to die out there. Yeah, they did. More documents, more irregularities, pages missing from contracts, dates that didn't align, a medical certification declaring Arthur incompetent, signed by Dr. Richard Foster. Who's Dr. Foster? Arthur's physician, our doctor for 20 years. He signed this saying your husband lacks mental capacity to manage his affairs. That's absurd. Aisha searched for Dr. Foster's name in the medical database, found his credentials, his practice information. Interesting, she murmured. What? Dr. Foster's daughter, Emily Foster, arrested 2 months ago for drug possession. Case is still pending. Aisha looked up. Want to bet your daughter-in-law offered to make that disappear in exchange for a signature? Margaret put her face in her hands. How can Julian be part of this? Because he's weak. Arthur's voice came from the bedroom doorway. He stood there leaning against the frame. Our son is a weak man who married a strong woman, a cruel, calculating woman. Arthur, you should be resting. I'm done resting. He moved slowly to the table, sat down heavily. What did you find? Aisha explained everything. The invalid notary, the forged signatures, the coerced medical certification. Arthur listened, his expression hardening. Can we fight this? He asked. Maybe. Probably. But, Aisha hesitated. But what? But the moment you surface, they'll know. And if they're willing to leave you to die, what else are they willing to do? They'll try to finish the job, Margaret said quietly. Exactly. Aisha spread the papers out. We need more than this. We need proof of their intent, proof of the fraud, proof that you're both competent and coerced. We need an airtight case before we make a move. How do we get that proof? Arthur asked. Aisha thought for a long moment. She was a records clerk, not a lawyer, not an investigator, just a single mother who knew how to file papers and spot inconsistencies. But she'd learned how to be invisible, how to move through systems without being noticed, how to find information people wanted hidden. I can do this, she said slowly. Through work, I have access to databases most people don't know exist. Property records, legal filings, notary registrations, medical certifications. I can verify every signature, every seal, every claim. That could take weeks, Margaret said. No, it'll take 3 days, maybe 4. I know exactly where to look. Arthur studied her. Why are you doing this? Because your son has money and lawyers. You're 2 elderly people with a story about being abandoned. Who do you think the cops would believe? So we stay hidden, Margaret said. You stay hidden. I go to work like normal. I research every document in this pile, and when I have enough evidence to bury them, Aisha smiled. Then we make them pay. Arthur reached across the table, took her hand. I'll pay you back for this. When we win. When we win, Aisha interrupted. You'll help other people like me, people who get screwed by the system because they don't know how to fight back. Deal. Arthur's eyes were wet. Deal. Margaret stood, walked to the window. Outside, the snow had stopped. She pressed her palm against the cold glass. I used to look down on people like you, she said softly. People in neighborhoods like this. I thought you were there because you didn't work hard enough. She turned back. I was wrong about everything. You were ignorant, Aisha said. But you're learning. That's what counts. They sat together as the night deepened, planning a war against people who thought they'd already won. In the dim light of that shabby apartment over stolen documents, something shifted. A bond formed, not of blood or obligation, but of shared purpose. By dawn, they had a plan. Dangerous, probably illegal, and relying entirely on Aisha's ability to navigate bureaucratic systems without being caught. But it was a chance. And for people left to die in the snow, a chance was more than they'd had yesterday. The Sullivan estate looked different at night. Crystal chandeliers blazed in every room. Music drifted from open windows. Laughter echoed across manicured lawns that had taken 3 generations to perfect. Evelyn stood in the center of the grand ballroom, champagne flute raised high. To new beginnings, she announced. 30 guests cheered. Investment bankers, real estate moguls, socialites who'd always envied the Sullivan name. Now they were here drinking the family's vintage wine, admiring what Evelyn had already begun to call her estate. I have to say, Evelyn, a woman in a red dress, purred, you've done wonders with this place already. So much more modern. The Sullivans were stuck in the past. Evelyn gestured dismissively at the oil paintings still hanging on the walls. All this old money nonsense, tradition this, legacy that. It was suffocating. "Where are Arthur and Margaret tonight?" someone asked. Evelyn's smile didn't waver. "Oh, they decided to take an extended vacation. Europe, I think. Maybe somewhere warmer. You know how elderly people get about the cold." Julian stood near the window, a glass of scotch untouched in his hand. He watched his wife work the room, watched her lie with practiced ease, watched her celebrate while his parents were... He couldn't finish the thought. "Julian," Evelyn's voice cut through his spiral. "Darling, come tell everyone about the renovation plans." He crossed the room mechanically, smiled when he was supposed to smile, nodded when she outlined her vision for tearing down the east wing, replacing the gardens with a pool, converting his grandfather's study into a home gym. "Those old people rattling around in here," Evelyn said, her hand possessively on Julian's arm. "Such a waste of space. Now we can actually use this property properly." "Properly," Julian echoed. His voice sounded hollow, even to himself. Later, after the guests had stumbled to their cars and Ubers, Evelyn kicked off her heels in the master bedroom, Arthur and Margaret's bedroom. She'd already stripped it of their belongings, replaced the antique furniture with sleek modern pieces. "God, I'm exhausted." She stretched across the king-sized bed. "But worth it. Did you see how jealous Rebecca was? And Marcus practically begged me to let him invest in the business." Julian stood in the doorway. "We need to talk about my parents." "What about them?" "Evelyn, we left them in the worst neighborhood in the city, in a snowstorm, with nothing." She sat up, her expression hardening. "We've been through this. They signed everything over willingly. You know they didn't understand what they were signing." "That's not my problem." Evelyn's voice went cold. "Your father was losing it anyway, forgetting meetings, mixing up names. The medical evaluation confirmed it. Dr. Foster was coerced. Dr. Foster did his job." She stood, walked to the dresser where Julian's laptop sat, opened it with deliberate slowness. "Speaking of jobs, I've been reviewing the accounts. Did you know your father kept a separate emergency fund, $2 million, just sitting there?" Julian's stomach dropped. "That was for nothing. It's in the Cayman account now. Transferred this morning." She smiled at him. "Along with the bonds, the stock portfolio, and the contents of the safe deposit box." "Evelyn, that's what Julian theft, from whom the estate is legally ours. Every signature checked out, every document notarized. Your parents are just two old people who made bad decisions." He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, that they'd gone too far, that his parents could still what? Evelyn asked, reading his face. "Come back. Challenge us with what resources, what proof?" She closed the laptop. "They have nothing. They are nothing. And if they're stupid enough to still be alive somewhere, they won't be for long. Not in that neighborhood. Not at their age." The casual cruelty in her voice made Julian's blood run cold. "You sound like you're hoping they die," he said quietly. "I'm being realistic." Evelyn pulled off her necklace, laid it carefully in a jewelry box that had belonged to Margaret. "Old people freeze to death every winter in this city. It's tragic, but it happens. And when it does, there won't be anyone left to question our ownership. They're my parents. They were your parents. Past tense." She crossed to him, ran a finger down his chest. "Now you're free. We're free. Free from their judgment, their disappointment, their constant reminders that you'll never measure up to your father's legacy." Julian flinched. That hit too close. "Don't you see?" Evelyn's voice softened, turned persuasive. "This is your chance to build something new, not in your father's shadow, but as your own man, with the resources you deserve. Resources I stole. Resources you inherited early. There's a difference." She kissed his cheek. "Now stop moping and come to bed. Tomorrow we're meeting with the interior designer about the ballroom." But Julian didn't move. He stood there looking at the woman he'd married, wondering when he'd stopped recognizing her. Or maybe he'd never really known her at all. The next morning, Evelyn made a phone call from Arthur's former office. She'd already had it redecorated, the mahogany desk replaced with glass and chrome. "Mr. Dawson, this is Evelyn Sullivan. I need your services." The voice on the other end was gravel and cigarettes. "What kind of services?" "Verification services. I need to confirm that two individuals are no longer a concern." "You want me to find them or make sure they can't be found?" "The latter." Evelyn examined her manicure. "There's a substantial bonus if you can confirm they've been dealt with by natural causes. The cold, perhaps, or an accident. I understand. Names: Arthur and Margaret Sullivan. Last seen 3 nights ago, dropped off near the corner of 5th and Brennan. That's rough territory. Exactly. I imagine they didn't last long, but I need confirmation. And, Mr. Dawson, if by some miracle they're still breathing, I need to know their location. Immediately. Going to visit them? Something like that? She hung up, then opened her laptop. The offshore account dashboard showed the transfers completing. $2 million here, $5 million there. The stock portfolio converted to bearer bonds. The art collection appraised and ready for private sale. By the end of the week, she'd have $17 million completely untraceable tucked away where no court could touch it, even if someone did challenge the estate. Not that anyone would. Dr. Foster's evaluation was airtight. The notary had been expensive but thorough, and the lawyer she'd hired specialized in expedited probate for elderly clients with diminished capacity. Everything was perfect. Julian appeared in the doorway looking like he hadn't slept. "The movers are here," he said, "for the furniture you wanted removed." "Excellent." Evelyn stood. "Let's go watch." In the entrance hall, a crew of men were loading antiques onto a truck. Arthur's grandfather's desk, Margaret's grandmother's china cabinet, the rocking chair where Julian had been rocked as a baby. "Where is this all going?" Julian asked. "Donation center downtown. Let some poor people enjoy it." "These are family heirlooms. These are old furniture." Evelyn checked her phone. "Oh, and I've scheduled the portrait removal for this afternoon. All those gloomy ancestors staring down at everyone. So depressing." "The family portraits? I'm having them taken to storage, or maybe just disposed of. Haven't decided yet." She noticed his expression. "Oh, don't look at me like that. We can keep 1 or 2 if you're sentimental, but the rest gone." A worker carried out a wooden chest ornately carved. "Wait," Julian said. "That was my father's. His father gave it to him. And now it's going to Goodwill. Full circle." Evelyn waved the mover on. Julian watched the chest disappear into the truck. Inside it, he knew were his father's military medals, his grandmother's letters, photos from 5 generations of Sullivans. His family's history carted away like garbage. "I can't do this," he said. Evelyn turned her eyes sharp. "Can't do what?" "This. Any of this. We need to find them. We need to do nothing." Her voice dropped dangerous. "Julian, listen to me very carefully. Every account is in my name now. Every transfer requires my signature. If you suddenly develop a conscience, you'll find yourself exactly where your parents are. Broke, homeless, and alone. You'd do that to me. I'd do that to anyone who threatens what I've built, what we've built together." She softened slightly. "But it won't come to that, will it? Because you're smarter than your parents. You understand how the world really works." Julian looked at her, really looked at her, saw the calculation behind her beauty, the ice beneath her charm. "What happened to you?" he whispered. "Nothing happened to me. I've always been this way." Evelyn smiled. "You were just too blind to see it, or too desperate for someone to want you despite being second-rate compared to your father." The words landed like physical blows. She patted his cheek. "Now go upstairs and take a Xanax or something. You're making the movers uncomfortable." Evelyn walked away, heels clicking on marble floors that had been laid by Julian's great-grandfather. She didn't look back. And Julian stood there surrounded by strangers dismantling his family's legacy and realized he'd become exactly what his father had always feared. A failure, a coward, a man who'd sold his soul and his parents for a woman who'd never loved him at all. The snow outside had melted, but Julian had never felt colder. Monday morning, Aisha walked into the county records office like nothing had changed. Same coffee-stained blouse, same tired smile for the security guard, same swipe of her badge at the door. "Morning, Aisha," her supervisor called out. "Morning, Mrs. Thompson." She settled at her desk, logged into her computer, and pulled up the day's filing queue. 47 property transfers waiting for verification. Routine work. Boring work. The kind of work that made her invisible. Perfect. At her apartment, Arthur and Malik were probably eating the oatmeal she'd left out. Margaret would be resting still, recovering from their ordeal. They'd agreed to stay hidden, stay quiet, stay alive. Aisha's job was to build the case that would save them. She worked through the morning queue mechanically, stamped approvals, flagged inconsistencies, forwarded documents to the appropriate departments. Around her, coworkers gossiped about weekend plans and office politics. Nobody paid attention to the single mother in the corner who never caused trouble. At noon, the office emptied for lunch. Aisha waited until the last person left, then locked her door from the inside. She pulled out the notes she'd made the night before. Robert Chen's notary license number, the dates on the Sullivan transfer documents, the signature comparisons that didn't quite match. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, accessing the National Notary Registration Database. She'd used this system 1,000 times for legitimate work. Nobody monitored individual searches unless they were flagged as suspicious. She typed in Chen's license number. The profile loaded. Robert Chen, licensed notary since 2008. Specialization in estate transfers and property law. Good standing until there it was. License revoked October 15th. 6 weeks ago. Reason: fraudulent notarization of documents for financial gain. Criminal charges pending. Aisha's heart pounded. She checked the Sullivan transfer deed again. Notarization date November 3rd, 3 weeks after Chen's license was revoked, which meant the document was legally void. She took a screenshot, saved it to a flash drive she'd bought specifically for this. Then she dug deeper into Chen's history, found the complaint that led to his revocation. A widow had discovered her home had been transferred without her knowledge, using documents Chen had notarized despite never meeting her. The pattern was familiar. Chen was a notary for hire willing to stamp anything if the price was right. Aisha pulled up the second document from Margaret's bag, the bank authorization with Sarah Williams's notary seal. She ran Williams's license number, active, no complaints, clean record, but something bothered her. She zoomed in on the digital scan of Williams's signature on the Sullivan document, then pulled up Williams's official signature from the state registry. The loops were different. The pressure points didn't match. This wasn't Sarah Williams's signature at all. Someone had forged it using Chen's technique as a template. Aisha sat back, her mind racing. This wasn't sloppy work by desperate amateurs. This was professional fraud, the kind that required inside knowledge of notary procedures and access to official seals. Evelyn had help, someone with experience in document forgery. Think, Aisha whispered to herself. She needed more than invalid notarizations. She needed proof of intent. Proof that Arthur and Margaret had been coerced, not incompetent. The medical certification, Dr. Richard Foster's statement that Arthur lacked mental capacity. Aisha pulled up her personal phone, the burner she'd bought yesterday. She'd found Dr. Foster's office number in the documents. Now she needed to convince him to tell the truth. She dialed. 3 rings. Foster Medical Practice, this is Jennifer. Hi, I need to speak with Dr. Foster. It's about a patient evaluation he completed recently. Dr. Foster is with a patient. Can I take a message? It's urgent. It's about Arthur Sullivan. A pause. Hold, please. 2 minutes passed. Then a man's voice, tight with stress. This is Dr. Foster. Doctor, my name is Aisha Williams. I'm calling about the mental capacity evaluation you signed for Arthur Sullivan. I can't discuss patient information. I'm not asking you to. I'm telling you that evaluation was used to steal an elderly man's entire estate. And I'm giving you one chance to tell me the truth before I go to the state medical board. Silence. Doctor, I know about your daughter, Emily Foster, arrested on drug charges 2 months ago. I know the case is still pending, and I know someone offered to make it disappear if you sign that evaluation. Who is this really? His voice shook. Someone trying to help the people you hurt. Did Evelyn Sullivan threaten you? Another long silence. Then quietly, she said Emily would go to prison, that she had connections with the prosecutor's office, that one phone call could turn a misdemeanor into a felony. So you lied about Arthur's mental state. He's sharp as ever. There's nothing wrong with him. Dr. Foster's voice cracked. But Emily's my only child. I didn't know what else to do. I need you to put that in writing. I can't. If Evelyn finds out, if you don't, I'll make sure the medical board knows you falsified a patient evaluation for personal gain. You'll lose your license. Emily will still go to trial, and you'll have nothing. She heard him breathing, heard the sound of a door closing. What do you want me to write? The truth. That you were coerced into signing a false evaluation. That Arthur Sullivan is fully competent. Email it to me within 2 hours. She gave him the burner email address she'd set up. How do I know you won't use this against me? You don't, but it's the only play you have left. She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking. She'd just blackmailed a doctor, threatened him, crossed lines she'd never thought she'd cross. But when she thought of Arthur crying over half a slice of bread, of Margaret's hands trembling as she described being pushed into furniture, the guilt faded. Some lines needed to be crossed. Back at her apartment that evening, Aisha found Margaret pacing by the window. "Did you find anything?" "More than I expected." Aisha pulled out her laptop, showed Margaret the evidence, the revoked notary license, the forged signatures. "But we need one more piece. Bank records showing Evelyn is moving money." Margaret's face went pale. "The accounts are all in Julian's name now. Or hers. I don't have access." "But you know the security questions, right? The ones they ask to verify identity." "Some of them. Arthur and I set up those accounts 40 years ago." "Then we're calling the bank." They used the burner phone and put it on speaker. Margaret's hands shook as she dialed the private banking number she'd memorized decades ago. "Sullivan Family Trust, this is David speaking." Margaret's voice steadied. "This is Margaret Sullivan. I need to verify some recent transactions on our primary account." "Of course, Mrs. Sullivan. For security purposes, I need to ask you a few questions. What is your mother's maiden name?" "Whitmore." "What city were you married in?" "Boston." "And what is your account password?" Margaret closed her eyes. Compass rose. Capital C, capital R. Keyboard clicks. Then David's voice, professional, but confused. "Mrs. Sullivan, I show that account access was changed 3 weeks ago. The new primary holder is listed as Evelyn Sullivan, with Julian Sullivan as secondary. I'm aware. I'm calling to verify the recent transaction history." "Let me pull that up. One moment." More clicking. "I'm showing several large transfers. November 5th, $2 million to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. November 8th, $5 million converted to bearer bonds. November 12th, $6 million to a Swiss account. And this morning, another $4 million transferred to Mrs. Sullivan. Are you aware these transactions are happening?" Margaret's voice was ice. "I am now. Can you tell me the current balance in the trust fund?" "The primary trust currently holds $1.2 million, down from $18 million as of 3 weeks ago." Aisha saw Margaret's face go white, saw her grip the table edge. "Thank you, David. I'll be in touch." She hung up before he could ask more questions. $18 million, Margaret whispered. "She's stolen almost $17 million in 3 weeks." "She's running," Aisha said, "getting everything offshore before anyone can stop her. We need to move now." That night, Aisha spread everything across her kitchen table: the invalid notary documents, the forged signatures, the screenshot of Chen's revoked license. Dr. Foster's confession email had arrived an hour ago, laying out exactly how Evelyn had threatened him, and now they had proof of the money disappearing to offshore accounts. Arthur studied the evidence, his jaw set. "This is enough, isn't it, to challenge the transfer? It's enough to prove fraud, but we need to be smart about how we use it." Aisha pulled up a document template on her laptop. "First, we file an emergency injunction to freeze all Sullivan family accounts. Then we submit this evidence to the district attorney's office. Fraud, elder abuse, coercion, forgery. Evelyn won't know what hit her." "When?" Margaret asked. "Tomorrow. I'll take a personal day, file everything at the courthouse by noon. By evening, every account she controls will be frozen. Every transfer will be investigated." "She'll come after us," Arthur said quietly. "Let her try." Aisha's smile was sharp. "I've got everything documented, backed up in 3 locations with copies sent to a lawyer I trust. If anything happens to any of us, it all goes public." Margaret reached across the table, took Aisha's hand. "You've risked everything for us." "Not everything. Just my boring, safe, poverty-level life." Aisha squeezed back. "Besides watching you take down your evil daughter-in-law, that's worth a little risk." For the first time since the night in the snow, Arthur laughed. Really laughed. "Tomorrow," he said, "we take back what's ours." Tomorrow, the war began. The email went out at 9 a.m. Tuesday morning from County Property Registration Office to Evelyn Sullivan. Subject urgent. Property transfer discrepancy, Mrs. Sullivan. We have identified technical irregularities in the property transfer documents filed for the Sullivan estate file. Hash 2847 SK. Your immediate presence is required at the County Registration Office Conference Room B today at 2:00 p.m. to resolve these issues. Failure to appear may result in suspension of the transfer pending further investigation. Regards, Office of Property Registration. Aisha hit send, then sat back in her chair. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. At the apartment, Arthur was putting on the suit they'd bought yesterday at Goodwill. Margaret was fixing her hair in the cracked bathroom mirror. Both of them looked 10 years younger than they had 5 days ago. "Ready?" Aisha had asked that morning. "Ready," Arthur had replied. Now it was just a matter of waiting. Evelyn's response came within 15 minutes. I'll be there with legal counsel. This had better not waste my time. Aisha smiled. Perfect. At 1:30, she left her desk and walked to conference room B. Detective Morris from the Fraud Division was already there, along with a representative from the district attorney's office named Sarah Chen. They'd been surprisingly eager to attend once Aisha had shown them the preliminary evidence. The subjects don't know we're here, Detective Morris asked. They think it's a routine administrative meeting, Aisha confirmed. And the alleged victims, waiting in the side office, they'll enter on my signal. Sarah Chen reviewed the documents spread across the table. The forged notarizations, Dr. Foster's confession, the bank transfer records. This is extensive fraud. If everything checks out, we're looking at multiple felony charges. It'll check out, Aisha said. At 1:55, Evelyn arrived. She swept into the building like she owned it, 3 lawyers trailing behind her. Tailored black suit, expensive heels, hair pulled back in a severe bun that probably cost $200 to style. Julian followed at a distance, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Aisha met them in the hallway. Mrs. Sullivan, thank you for coming. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. You're the clerk who sent that email. I'm the record specialist handling your file. This way, please. She led them to conference room B. Evelyn entered first, stopped short when she saw the detective and the DA representative. What is this? Her voice went sharp. Please sit down, Detective Morris said. We have some questions about the Sullivan estate transfer. Evelyn's lead lawyer, a man with silver hair and a $5,000 suit, stepped forward. My client was told this was an administrative matter. It is, Sarah Chen said calmly. We're administering an investigation into potential fraud. Fraud? Evelyn laughed. It sounded forced. This is absurd. Everything was done legally. We have documentation. We have documentation too, Aisha interrupted. She placed the first file on the table. This is the property transfer deed you filed, notarized by Robert Chen on November 3rd. So, Robert Chen's notary license was revoked on October 15th, less than a month before this document was allegedly notarized. Aisha slid a second paper across. This is the official revocation notice from the state. Evelyn's lawyer picked it up, scanned it. His expression changed. This could be a clerical error, he said. Could be, except there's more. Aisha laid out the second document, this bank authorization notarized by Sarah Williams. Except Sarah Williams' signature doesn't match her official registry signature. Someone forged it. You're making serious accusations, the lawyer said. I'm presenting evidence. Aisha opened her laptop, pulled up the comparison images. The forged signature versus the real one side by side. The differences were clear. Julian had gone pale. He stared at the documents like they might bite him. Evelyn's face remained perfectly composed. Even if there were irregularities in the notarization, the transfer was legitimate. Arthur and Margaret Sullivan signed those documents willingly. Did they? Sarah Chen asked. Because we have a statement from Dr. Richard Foster saying he was coerced into falsifying a mental capacity evaluation for Arthur Sullivan. She placed Dr. Foster's confession on the table. Evelyn's mask cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. Dr. Foster is lying to save his daughter from drug charges, she said quickly. Interesting that you know about his daughter, Detective Morris noted. Did you use that knowledge to pressure him? I want to speak to my lawyer. Alone. In a moment. First, there's someone who'd like to join us. Aisha walked to the side door, opened it. Arthur and Margaret Sullivan stepped into the conference room. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Julian stood so fast his chair fell over. Oh my God! Evelyn's face went white, then red, then white again. No, this isn't. Hello, son, Arthur said quietly. He looked good. The bruises had faded. His suit fit well. His eyes were clear and sharp and filled with disappointment, so deep it seemed to fill the room. Margaret stood beside him, regal, despite the cheap dress they'd bought at Target. She looked at her son and daughter-in-law like they were strangers. You're supposed to be Evelyn couldn't finish. Dead, Margaret supplied. Yes, I imagine that was the plan. Leave us in the worst neighborhood in the city in a snowstorm with no money or identification. Wait for nature to take its course. Julian was shaking. Mom, Dad, we didn't mean... You meant exactly what happened, Arthur said. His voice was steady. You forged our signatures. You falsified medical documents. You threatened a doctor to get what you wanted. And then you dumped us like garbage and hoped we'd freeze to death. That was Evelyn. Julian's voice cracked. I didn't want to. She made me. "Oh, shut up, Julian," Evelyn snapped. Her composure was returning. She turned to her lawyers. "This is clearly a setup. These people are obviously coached. They probably aren't even the real Arthur and Margaret Sullivan." "We can verify identity," Detective Morris said. "And we have this." Aisha pulled up the bank records on her laptop. David from Sullivan Family Trust confirmed these transactions. $17 million transferred to offshore accounts over 3 weeks. All after Mrs. Evelyn Sullivan took control of the accounts. She turned the screen so everyone could see the list of transfers, the account numbers, the dates. "That's legal asset management," Evelyn's lawyer said, but his voice was uncertain now. "It's money laundering," Sarah Chen corrected, "moving assets offshore to hide them from legitimate claims. Combined with the fraudulent documentation and the abandonment of the elderly account holders, this is a clear pattern of financial exploitation and elder abuse." Evelyn stood abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this." "Yes, you do," Detective Morris said. "Sit down, Mrs. Sullivan." For a moment, it looked like Evelyn might bolt. Her eyes darted to the door, calculating distances, measuring chances. Then her lawyer put a hand on her arm. "Evelyn, sit." She sat. Arthur moved closer to the table. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. "You're going to return everything you stole. Every dollar, every asset, every piece of property. And then you're going to face criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and elder abuse." "You can't prove any of this," Evelyn said, but the confidence was gone from her voice. "We already have." Aisha gestured to the files covering the table. Invalid notarizations, forged signatures, coerced medical evaluations, offshore transfers that violate trust fund regulations. "And that's just what I found in 4 days. 4 days, Julian whispered. He looked at his parents. "You've been alive this whole time where?" "With someone who actually has compassion," Margaret said coldly. "Someone who gave us shelter when our own son left us to die." The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Sarah Chen stood. "Detective Morris, I believe we have sufficient evidence to request an immediate freeze on all accounts associated with Julian and Evelyn Sullivan pending a full investigation." "Agreed," Morris said. He pulled out his radio. "I need a financial hold on the following accounts." He read off the list Aisha had prepared. Every bank account, every investment portfolio, every piece of property currently titled to Julian or Evelyn. Evelyn's face went through a series of expressions: shock, denial, fury, and finally fear. "You can't do this," she said. "We have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Detective Morris said. "I suggest you use it. The district attorney's office will be filing formal charges within 48 hours. Until then, consider yourselves persons of interest in an ongoing fraud investigation." Julian collapsed back into his chair. His face was the color of old newspaper. "Dad, please. I'm sorry. I didn't—" "Don't," Arthur said. The single word cut like a knife. "Don't apologize now. Don't beg forgiveness. You made your choices. You chose money over family. You chose this woman over your own parents. Now you live with those choices." Margaret turned away from her son. She couldn't even look at him anymore. "We're done here," she said to Aisha. They left the conference room together, Arthur, Margaret, and Aisha. Behind them, Evelyn was arguing viciously with her lawyers, while Julian sat frozen, staring at nothing. In the hallway, Arthur took a deep breath. "Is it over?" "The first part is," Aisha said. "Now comes the legal battle. But with this evidence, they don't stand a chance." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Thank you for everything. Thank me when you're back in your home." They walked out of the building into afternoon sunshine. The air was cold but clear. Somewhere behind them, an empire built on fraud was crumbling, and 3 people who'd been left for dead in the snow stood victorious in the light. The court order came through on Friday afternoon. Emergency injunction granted. Property rights restored to Arthur and Margaret Sullivan effective immediately. By 6 p.m., 2 security guards stood at the gates of the Sullivan estate. Men who'd worked for Arthur for 20 years before Julian had fired them. They looked pleased to be back. "Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan sent us," the older guard told Evelyn when she pulled up in her Mercedes. "You have 30 minutes to collect personal belongings and vacate the premises." Evelyn's face went purple. "This is my house, you can't—" "Court order says otherwise, ma'am. 30 minutes." She floored the accelerator up the driveway, tires spraying gravel. Julian's car was already there. He'd been served the papers at his office an hour ago, escorted out by building security, while his former colleagues watched. Inside, Evelyn found Julian standing in the entrance hall, staring at nothing. "We're being evicted," she said. "Right now. 30 minutes. "I know." His voice was hollow. "I got the order too." "Then start packing jewelry art, anything valuable we can." "It's all sealed." He pointed to red tags on the paintings, the sculptures, the antique furniture. "Court-ordered asset freeze. If we touch anything, we go to jail." Evelyn ran to the bedroom, threw open her jewelry box. Empty. She checked the safe, sealed with an official notice. The closets full of designer clothes, all tagged as estate property pending investigation. No, no, no! She grabbed dresses anyway, started shoving them into garbage bags. The only containers left in the house. Julian appeared in the doorway. "The bank accounts are frozen too. All of them, even the offshore ones." "That's impossible. Those accounts are traceable. Everything's traceable." He laughed, but it sounded like crying. "The DA's office had financial forensics people. They found every transfer, every account, every dollar you tried to hide." Evelyn's hand shook as she stuffed clothes into bags. "We'll go to hotels. Use credit cards until this blows over." "I tried. They're all declined. Every card is maxed or frozen." She stopped, looked at him. "What?" "We have nothing, Evelyn. No access to money, no assets, nothing. Just like my parents when we dumped them in the snow." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. 20 minutes later, they stood in the driveway with 4 garbage bags of clothes and toiletries. Everything else they'd tried to take had been confiscated by the guards. "Ma'am, you need to leave the property now," the security guard said, not unkindly, but firmly. A news van pulled up to the gate, then another. Word had spread fast. Wealthy couple defrauded elderly parents, now being evicted from stolen estate. It was the kind of story reporters lived for. Camera lights flared. Evelyn ducked her head, but not fast enough. "Mrs. Sullivan, is it true you left your in-laws to die in a snowstorm?" "Evelyn, what do you have to say about the fraud charges?" "Julian, did you know your wife was transferring millions offshore?" Evelyn shoved past Julian to the Mercedes, tried the key. The car wouldn't start. "What now?" she screamed. The guard cleared his throat. "That vehicle is registered as estate property, ma'am. You'll need to leave it here." "How are we supposed to leave?" He pointed down the long driveway. "There's a bus stop about 2 miles that way." The symmetry was perfect. Cruel and perfect. They walked. Julian carried 2 bags, Evelyn the other 2. Reporters followed them to the gate cameras, rolling, shouting questions they didn't answer. The gate closed behind them with a metallic clang. Snow had started falling again, light flurries that would probably turn heavy by midnight, just like the night Arthur and Margaret had been abandoned. "We need a hotel," Evelyn said. She pulled out her phone, started searching. "Found a cheap motel 6 miles away. We can walk there." "In this," Julian gestured at the snow at Evelyn's heels, at the garbage bags they were carrying. "What choice do we have?" They walked. Past the country club where they'd celebrated their engagement, past the shopping district where Evelyn had bought $10,000 handbags without thinking, past the restaurant where they'd eaten last week back when they thought they'd won. By the time they reached the motel, they were soaked and frozen. Evelyn's feet were bleeding from her designer heels. Julian's hands were numb from carrying the bags. The motel clerk looked them up and down, took in the garbage bags, the wet clothes, the desperate eyes. $65 a night, cash only. "We have credit cards," Evelyn said. "Credit cards don't work here. Cash." Julian checked his wallet. $32. "That's all we have." The clerk shrugged. "Can't help you." They tried 3 more places. Same story. No cash, no room. At the 4th motel, a place with mold on the walls and bars on the windows, Julian offered his watch, a Rolex he'd inherited from his grandfather. "How do I know it's real?" the manager asked. "It's real. Worth $50,000. The manager examined it, then offered $100. "That's what I can give you. Take it or leave it." Julian took it. The room was smaller than Margaret's walk-in closet had been. 1 bed with stained sheets, a bathroom with a broken lock, a window that didn't close all the way, letting in cold air and street noise. Evelyn dropped her bags and started crying. Not delicate tears, ugly, choking sobs. Julian sat on the bed, buried his face in his hands. "This is temporary," Evelyn said between sobs. "We'll figure this out. We'll hire better lawyers. We'll fight the charges." "With what money?" Julian's voice was flat. "Every account is frozen. Every asset is seized. The only lawyer who'll talk to us is a public defender. Your father will forgive you. He has to. You're his son. Did you see his face? He looked at me like I was already dead." More crying. From both of them now. Outside, someone was screaming. A fight, or maybe just Friday night in this neighborhood. Police sirens wailed in the distance. The motel manager pounded on the door. "Keep it down in there." Evelyn looked around the room like she couldn't believe it was real. The peeling wallpaper, the cigarette burns in the carpet, the roach crawling across the ceiling. 3 weeks ago, she'd hosted a party for 30 people in a ballroom with crystal chandeliers. Now she was in a motel room that cost less than her morning coffee used to. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "Where else can we go?" She had no answer. Julian thought about his parents in that bus shelter. Cold, hurt, abandoned. He'd done that to them. He'd let Evelyn convince him it was necessary, that they were too old, that the money belonged to the next generation anyway. Now he understood what he'd done. Really understood. "I need to see them," he said. "I need to apologize." "They won't see you." "I have to try." But even as he said it, he knew Evelyn was right. Arthur had made it clear in that conference room. His son was dead to him. The boy he'd raised was gone, replaced by this weak, greedy stranger who'd chosen money over family. Over the next week, things got worse. The DA's office filed formal charges. 17 counts, including fraud, forgery, elder abuse, money laundering, and conspiracy. The bail was set at $2 million each. Money they didn't have. Julian's lawyer, the exhausted public defender with too many cases, explained their options. "You can take a plea deal. Maybe get 5 to 7 years if you cooperate." "And if we fight it?" Evelyn asked. "With this much evidence, you'd lose. Probably get 15 to 20. They took the plea deal. What choice did they have? The Sullivan estate was fully restored to Arthur and Margaret. The board of directors voted unanimously to remove Julian from all positions in the family company. His name was stripped from the letterhead. Friends stopped calling. The social circle that had welcomed them so warmly now treated them like plague carriers. Nobody wanted to be associated with the people who'd tried to kill their own parents for money. They moved to a different motel when the first one kicked them out for late payment. Then another. Then a weekly rental in a building where half the units were condemned. The room was smaller than a prison cell would be. One window looking out at a brick wall. Shared bathroom down the hall. Neighbors who screamed at all hours. Evelyn stopped wearing makeup. Stopped doing her hair. She'd sold all her jewelry to the manager for $300, enough for 2 weeks' rent. Julian got a job washing dishes at a diner, minimum wage. The owner knew who he was, but hired him anyway, probably because it amused him to see a former millionaire scraping plates. On a Tuesday afternoon, Evelyn walked past the Sullivan estate. Couldn't help herself. Had to see it. The gates were open. Landscapers were working on the gardens. A moving truck was parked in the driveway. Arthur was there, directing workers. He looked healthy, strong. Nothing like the confused, dying man Dr. Foster had described in his false evaluation. Margaret stood beside him, pointing out where she wanted furniture placed. They looked happy. Evelyn started to approach, thought better of it. What would she say? Sorry for trying to kill you, sorry for stealing your life. She turned away, walked back to the moldy room she now called home, climbed the stairs past graffiti and garbage. Inside, Julian was sitting on the bed staring at his hands, the hands that had signed the papers, that had loaded his parents into a taxi and sent them to die. "I saw them today," Evelyn said. "They looked good." Julian didn't respond. "We could go talk to them, explain that we made mistakes, that we're sorry." "Are you sorry?" Julian asked quietly. Evelyn thought about it, really thought about it. "I'm sorry we got caught." Julian laughed. It was the saddest sound she'd ever heard. Outside, snow started falling again, heavy now, the kind of snow that buried everything. They sat in their room, two people who'd had everything and thrown it away for more. Now they had nothing except each other and the consequences of their choices. And unlike Arthur and Margaret, no stranger would stop to help them in the cold. The knock came on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after the eviction, 2 weeks before the sentencing hearing. Aisha was doing dishes when she heard it. Malik was at the table coloring. Arthur and Margaret had moved back to the estate, but they'd insisted on visiting every weekend. Today they were having coffee in her tiny living room. She opened the door. Julian stood there, hollow-eyed and gaunt. He'd lost 20 pounds. His clothes hung on him like he was a scarecrow. Behind him, Evelyn looked worse. No makeup, hair unwashed, eyes red from crying or lack of sleep, or both. "Please," Julian said, "I need to see my parents." Aisha should have slammed the door, should have told him to leave, called the police, done anything except what she did. She stepped aside. Julian walked in like a man approaching his own execution. Evelyn followed her head down. In the living room, Arthur and Margaret looked up. The recognition on their faces was immediate. Margaret's hand went to her throat. Arthur's jaw tightened. Julian dropped to his knees in front of his father, just collapsed like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. "Dad, please. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Arthur stared down at his son, said nothing. "I was weak. I was stupid. I let her." Julian gestured back at Evelyn. "I let her convince me that you were going to lose everything anyway, that we were helping that you were entitled to my life's work before I was dead." Arthur's voice was ice. Julian flinched. "Yes. No. I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. The business was struggling, and Evelyn said if we had control earlier, we could turn it around, and you just decided your parents were disposable. No, I never meant for you to." Julian's voice broke. "I didn't think you'd actually be hurt. I thought you'd find somewhere to stay, that you'd call someone. We had no phone, no money, no identification." Margaret spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm, too calm. "You left us with nothing in the worst part of the city during a snowstorm. What exactly did you think would happen?" Evelyn stepped forward. Her face was blotchy with tears. "It was me. It was all me. Julian didn't want to do it. I pushed him. I threatened him." "Shut up, Evelyn," Julian said quietly. "No, they need to know it wasn't your fault. It was my fault. I signed the papers. I called the taxi. I told the driver where to take them." He looked up at his father. "I did it. All of it. And I'm sorry." "Are you sorry you did it?" Arthur asked. "Or sorry that you're now living in a roach-infested motel room working minimum wage?" The question hung in the air. Julian opened his mouth, closed it. "I don't know." At least he was honest. "We're going to prison," Evelyn said suddenly. She turned to Margaret. 5 years if we're lucky. 7, maybe more. We'll have nothing when we get out. We'll be middle-aged with criminal records and no money. And," her voice rose to a wail, "please, please just give us something. Enough to start over. Enough to run," Margaret asked. "Enough to survive." "The way you left us to survive." Evelyn's face crumpled. She sank to her knees beside Julian. "I made a mistake. I made so many mistakes, but please, you're his mother. You can't just abandon him like this." Margaret looked at her son, really looked at him, at the boy she'd raised, the man he'd become, the stranger kneeling on a stranger's floor, begging for money. "You're right," she said softly. "I'm his mother, which is why I won't let him go to prison thinking he can buy his way out of consequences." "We're not asking for much," Julian said desperately. "Just enough to hire a real lawyer, to maybe avoid jail time, to escape the punishment you earned." Arthur stood. He was taller than Julian remembered, stronger. "You committed fraud. You forged documents. You stole millions of dollars. You tried to kill us. And now you want me to pay for your defense. You're my father, and you were my son. Past tense." Arthur's voice didn't waver. "That boy died the night you put me in a taxi and told the driver to dump me in the snow. Dad, please. If Aisha hadn't stopped that night, your mother and I would be dead. Do you understand that? Actually dead. Frozen to death in a bus shelter while you were drinking champagne in our home." Julian was crying now. Ugly, desperate tears. I know. And I hate myself for it. Every day I wake up and I hate what I did, but I can't change it. I can't take it back. All I can do is ask for forgiveness." "Forgiveness," Arthur laughed. It was a terrible sound. "You want forgiveness from the people you tried to murder?" "Yes, please." Arthur walked to the kitchen, came back with an envelope. Plain white paper, nothing fancy. He handed it to Julian. Julian opened it with shaking hands. Inside were 2 bus tickets to a small town 300 miles away. "What is this?" "Your second chance," Arthur said. "That town has a factory that's hiring. I called in a favor. They'll give you jobs if you show up and work hard. The pay is minimum wage. The work is manual labor. You'll live in cheap apartments and struggle to make rent." Julian stared at the tickets. "You want us to leave? I want you to earn your way back from nothing, the way I did 50 years ago when I started my business. No inheritance, no connections, just work. We could stay here. You could go to prison for 7 years and come out with even less, or you could take those tickets and disappear. Start over in a place where nobody knows your name." Evelyn grabbed the envelope. Why are you doing this? Why help us at all? Margaret spoke. Her voice was quiet but final. Because somewhere buried very deep, there's still a part of me that remembers changing his diapers, reading him bedtime stories, watching him take his first steps. She looked at Julian. That part of me won't let you rot in prison, but it also won't give you money you didn't earn or forgiveness you don't deserve. Mom, those tickets are valid for 1 week. After that, I can't protect you from the DA anymore. They want to make an example of you. Without my testimony supporting a plea deal, you'll get maximum sentences. Julian's hands trembled as he held the tickets. You're choosing not to testify. I'm choosing to give you the same chance you gave us. A bus ticket and a prayer. Margaret's eyes were dry. No tears, no emotion at all. If you survive, it may be in 10 or 20 years we can talk again. Maybe. That's it. That's all we get. Arthur moved to the door, opened it. That's more than you gave us. Now leave. Evelyn stood clutching the envelope like a lifeline. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll work hard. We'll prove we can. I don't care what you do, Margaret said. Just do it somewhere else. Julian rose slowly. He looked at his father, at his mother, trying to memorize their faces, or maybe trying to find some last trace of love in their expressions. He found nothing. At the door, he turned back one last time. I really am sorry. For everything. I know you don't believe me, but it's true. Arthur met his eyes. I believe you're sorry you lost everything. That's not the same thing. Julian's face cracked, but he nodded, stepped into the hallway. Evelyn followed, still crying. Their voices echoed in the stairwell. Please, please, we can still fix this. We can. Aisha closed the door. The sound was final, absolute. In the sudden silence, Margaret sat down heavily. Her hands were shaking now. All the composure she'd maintained was crumbling. Did I do the right thing? She whispered. Arthur sat beside her, took her hand. You did the only thing you could live with. He's our son. He was our son. Now he's just a man who has to live with his choices. Malik looked up from his coloring. Why were those people crying, Mama? Aisha pulled him close. Because they learned that some things once broken can't be fixed. Through the door, faintly, they could still hear Evelyn's voice, pleading, begging, promising things she couldn't deliver. Then footsteps descending, fading, gone. Arthur and Margaret sat together on Aisha's worn couch in the apartment where strangers had saved their lives and mourned the son they'd lost long before that snowy night. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to grief, indifferent to redemption, offering nothing except the cold comfort of consequences. And in a building 3 miles away, 2 people boarded a bus to nowhere, carrying nothing but tickets and the weight of their sins. The door stayed closed behind them. 3 months after Julian left, Arthur made a decision. I'm selling the estate, he told Margaret over breakfast. They were sitting in the grand dining room where 5 generations of Sullivans had eaten. The table could seat 20. They were 2. Margaret set down her coffee cup. Are you sure? I walk through those halls and all I see are ghosts. Julian as a baby. Julian learning to ride a bike in the gardens. Julian graduating college. Arthur's voice was steady. The house is full of a son who doesn't exist anymore. Where would we go? Arthur smiled. I have an idea. 2 weeks later, he stood in front of Aisha's apartment building with a real estate agent. The owner had been trying to sell for years. The building was old, needed work, sat in a neighborhood most investors avoided. I'll take it, Arthur said. The whole building. The agent blinked. The whole, sir, there are 40 units here. Most are barely habitable. Then we'll make them habitable. He paid cash. The Sullivan estate sold for $12 million. This building cost $800,000. The rest would go into renovations and a trust fund for something he'd been planning. When Aisha came home from work that day, she found Arthur waiting in the lobby with blueprints spread across a folding table. What's this? She asked. Your new home. Well, everyone's new home. He pointed to the drawings. Ground floor becomes a community center, legal aid office, food bank, after-school program for kids. Floors 2 through 4 get completely renovated. New plumbing, new electrical, real insulation. Safe, warm apartments for families who need them. Aisha stared at the plans. This is Arthur. This is millions of dollars. I have millions of dollars. Had them sitting in a mansion I couldn't stand to live in anymore. He looked up at her. Margaret and I want to live here, top floor, near you and Malik, if you'll have us. Her eyes filled with tears. You want to live in this neighborhood. I want to live near family. The renovations took 4 months. Arthur hired local contractors, paid fair wages, insisted on quality work. The building transformed. New windows, fresh paint, a garden in the back courtyard where there'd only been concrete and weeds. And in that garden, Arthur planted sunflowers, hundreds of them. Why sunflowers? Malik asked, watching the old man dig. Because they grow even in difficult soil. They turn toward the light. And they remind me that beautiful things can come from dark places. Malik helped plant them, his small hands patting dirt around seeds that would grow taller than he was. By summer, the building was ready. Families moved in. Single mothers, elderly couples, people who'd been one rent check away from homelessness. Now they had homes with reasonable rent maintained by a landlord who actually fixed things when they broke. The ground floor opened as the Sullivan Community Center. Aisha ran it. She'd enrolled in night school for her law degree. Arthur paid the tuition. "You saved our lives," he said when she protested. "Let us invest in yours." The legal aid office helped 3 families fight wrongful evictions in the first month alone. Aisha used everything she'd learned taking down Evelyn, how to find the flaws in documents, how to trace fraudulent signatures, how to stand up to people with more money and power. She was good at it. Really good. Margaret taught classes in the community center, financial literacy for seniors, how to spot scams, how to protect yourself from predatory family members. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. On a Thursday afternoon, a woman came in crying. Her son had tried to steal her disability checks. Margaret sat with her for 3 hours, helped her set up protected accounts, walked her through filing a police report. "Thank you," the woman whispered. "I thought I was alone." "None of us are alone," Margaret said. "Not anymore." Arthur and Margaret's apartment on the top floor was simple. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room with windows facing the courtyard. Nothing like the estate they'd left behind. It was the happiest they'd been in 20 years. Malik called them Grandpa and Grandma now. They'd tried to correct him, at first explain they weren't really his grandparents. He'd looked confused. "You live here. You help Mama. You teach me stuff. That's what grandparents do." Hard to argue with 6-year-old logic. One evening in late July, the 4 of them sat on the building's new front porch. Arthur had insisted on adding it. Every home needs a place to watch the world go by. The sunflowers were in full bloom, golden and massive, turning their faces toward the setting sun. Malik ran through them, laughing, his arms spread wide like he could fly. Aisha watched him smiling. "He's never been this happy." "Neither have we," Margaret said. She leaned against Arthur, his arm around her shoulders. "Do you miss it?" Aisha asked. "The estate, the money, the life you had." "Sometimes I miss who I thought Julian was," Arthur said. "But the rest no. That life was lonely. This," he gestured at the courtyard, the families sitting on stoops, the kids playing. "This matters." Movement caught Aisha's eye. A man standing at the corner, thin, worn, watching the courtyard, Julian. She recognized him even though he'd changed. His clothes were old but clean. His face was gaunt. He stood there, hidden partially by a tree, watching Malik run through the sunflowers. Arthur saw him too. His body tensed. "Should I?" Aisha started. "No." Arthur's voice was firm. "Let him watch. Let him see what he gave up." Julian stood there for 10 minutes, maybe more, just watching the child laugh, watching his parents smile, watching the family he'd destroyed and the family they'd built in its place. Then he turned and walked away, disappeared into the crowd on the street. Margaret's hand found Arthur's, squeezed. "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe someday, when he's earned it. And if he does," Arthur thought about it, "then we'll see what kind of man he's become, whether he learned anything from losing everything." Malik ran back to the porch, out of breath, his face flushed with joy. "Grandpa, the sunflowers are taller than me." "Not for long. You're growing too." Arthur pulled him up onto his lap. "Soon you'll be taller than all of them." "Will you still be here when I'm big?" "As long as I can be Buddy." The sun was setting now, painting the sky orange and pink. The courtyard glowed golden with sunflower light and summer warmth. Aisha felt Margaret lean against her shoulder. The gesture was so casual, so familiar, like they'd been family forever instead of just months. "You know what I learned," Margaret said quietly. "What?" "Family isn't about blood. It's not about who you're born to or who shares your DNA." She watched Malik cuddle against Arthur, watched her husband's face soften with love for a child who wasn't his grandson by any legal definition. Family is about who stops in the snow when they could keep walking, who gives their coat when they're cold too, who risks everything to help strangers who became something more. Aisha's throat tightened. That's beautiful. It's true. Margaret straightened, looked at her. You're my daughter now, more than any daughter-in-law ever was. And that boy, she nodded at Malik. He's our grandson, not because we share blood, because we choose each other every day. We do, Aisha said. We really do. Night fell slowly. One by one, lights came on in the apartments above them. Families settling in for the evening. Safe. Warm. Home. Mrs. Chen from the corner store walked by, waved. Beautiful flowers, Arthur. Thank you. Come by this weekend. We're having a community cookout. I'll bring dumplings. This was life now. Potlucks and shared gardens, legal clinics and after-school programs. People helping people, because that's what neighbors do. Arthur stood, lifted Malik onto his shoulders. Bedtime soon, buddy. 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes. They walked into the courtyard together. 3 generations that shouldn't exist. An old white couple, a young black woman, a child who belonged to all of them. And around them, sunflowers stood tall, growing in difficult soil, turning toward the light, finding beauty in dark places. Margaret took Aisha's hand. They stood together watching Arthur and Malik examine flowers in the fading light. Family, Margaret whispered, isn't the people who share your blood and break your heart. It's the strangers who offer their coat in a blizzard and change your world. Aisha squeezed her hand. Yeah, it is. Somewhere out there, Julian was starting over, learning what his father had learned 50 years ago, that everything worth having must be earned. Maybe he'd make it. Maybe he wouldn't. But here in this renovated building in a neighborhood people used to avoid a different family was thriving. Built not on inheritance or obligation, built on choice, on kindness, on the simple act of stopping when someone needs help. The sun set completely, stars began to appear, and 4 people who'd found each other in the snow walked inside together, home.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.